Biden gives his first address to a joint session of Congress, even though a majority of the Congress was not in attendance. And we look at the review of the events from Senators McCarthy, the New York Times, as well as the follow-up that came from Tim Scott. We look into a new shooting in Austin, Texas by police officers, and Trump has announced that he is restarting Maga Rallies. These stories and more on your April 30th Not So News update. Please like and subscribe if you're looking for daily news content. Let's dive on in. Starting us off from CNN Politics, Biden promises to lift left behind and forgotten Americans with his ambitious economic agenda. President Joe Biden spoke directly to working and middle-class Americans who feel left behind and forgotten in a rapidly changing economy in his first address to a joint session of Congress, promising that his ambitious economic and infrastructure plans announced to a blue-collar blueprint to build America. Addressing many of the voters who abandoned the Democratic Party to support former President Donald Trump, Biden made the case that his economic plans are squarely aimed at improving their economic fortunes while strengthening American positions around the globe and positioning America to compete against other world powers like China. I think I actually really like how CNN is phrasing this, because I think ultimately this is going to be the downfall of Biden or potentially Harris in the 2024 election, depending on who ends up actually running. I know there's been a lot of talk about Biden not actually running in 2024 just due to his age. But this gives us a reasonable question of, is the spending worth it? We already expect that taxes are going to increase for a majority of Americans, or there's going to be a significant change in deficit spending such that the power of the dollar is not worth as much as it can. So my little, test is going to be keeping track of how much you're spending on groceries, how much it costs, and looking, now compared to 4 years in the future when we're doing the 2024 campaign. And I want, individuals to be able to do a true test of if they're in a better position or not. I am not expecting a single new service provided by the government as a result of the new policies by Biden, but I am expecting to have to pay more, whether it's through increased prices for good or increased taxes, one or the other. My assumption then is that I will not be supporting this president in 2024. McCarthy had a similar opinion. He ended up doing a tweet out that said that the entire speech could have been done via email. This was reported by MSNBC, where reacting to President Biden's speech to Congress on Wednesday, which included Biden saying he's open to cooperation from Republicans, top Republican in the House, Kevin McCarthy, used Twitter to dismiss the speech entirely. Next, New York Times has a review of the address to Congress. We have to prove democracy still works. In his first address to Congress, President Biden made a clear case for vastly expanding the role of government and taxing the wealthiest to pay for it. This is the entire premise of what the Democrat Party is doing now, is an expansion on the federal government. I know that this is really the major divide between the two parties, is one party routinely argues for the government of states to be in charge of things such as the minimum wage, such as if they want the state to provide healthcare, and the other argument says that every single American should be held accountable via the federal government for those same types of programs. In the article by New York Times, yesterday, President Biden gave his first address to the joint session of Congress. The speech touched on a variety of themes from immigration system to foreign policy. The real focus of the speech, however, was the expansive vision for the role of American government. He detailed his proposals for investing in American economic future, spending plan that totals $4 trillion. We analyzed the president's address and his visions for remaking the American economy. You have to go behind the paywall to look into that. Being reported by Paris, Senator vote Tim Scott, referring to Tim Scott, the individual that ended up giving the Republican rebuttal to the Biden address. Had the following trending: Uncle Tim. And reported by Paris, he's fought for Black Americans his entire life. HBCU funding, criminal justice and police reform, school choice, and opportunity zones. Bigotry should always be denounced. Biden and Democrats should denounce the disgusting use of Uncle Tim. This is obviously a reference to Uncle Tom, which is a normally seen as a African American who is kind of giving in to the white suppressors. And I think, unfortunately, that we're showing that the Democrats were right all along. They do believe whites are racist, and they're just proving it when they get things like this trending. New York Times also ended up doing a fact check of the Biden address and the GOP rebuttal. Just looking at a couple of the rebuttals, there was the claim by Tim Scott that it would be easier to vote in Georgia than Democrat in New York. They claim that this is exaggerated, and the explanation for this is kind of interesting. Mr. Scott's correct in some ways, but opposite is true in others. To me, that seems like that would be justifiably be mostly true or mostly false. Additionally, just before COVID, we had the most inclusive economy in my lifetime, lowest unemployment record for African Americans, Hispanic, Asians, lower for women in nearly 7 years. This happened because Republicans focused on expanding opportunity for all Americans. They say this is exaggerated, and their justifiement for that claim is that even though the economy was at a record low, it wasn't. Their claim is that it wasn't the result of President Trump taking office, and that it was a trend that was continued. Now, there's two issues with this. First, when we think about how economies would work, we would expect some type of asymptotic approach, that there's going to be some type of equilibrium for something like unemployment. And if you continue past that equilibrium, you can say that you're doing something active that helps that type of motive. Additionally, they are not actually contradicting the statement made by Tim Scott, which in my opinion says that his claim was mostly true, not mostly false. Additionally, there were a couple of fact checks done against Joe Biden. The first, after 20 years of American valor and sacrifice, it's time we bring the troops home. Even as do we maintain an over-the-horizon capacity to suppress future threats to the homeland. This lacks evidence, and this is a reference to the Middle East. Additionally, we have talked to most reasonable gun owners, most hunters. They'll tell you there's no possible justification for having 100 rounds, 100 bullets in a weapon. They will tell you that there are too many people today who are able to buy a gun who shouldn't be able to. This is exaggerated, and they rightfully by the New York Times, they'd get a Pew Research study that says a majority of gun owners are fine with expansion of background checks. However, they are not in support of things like magazine limits or other things that actually have a targeted attack against some type of aspect of the gun ownership. Next, when I was vice president, the president asked me to focus on providing help needed to address the root cause of migration and to help keep people in their own countries instead of being forced to leave. The plan was working, but then the last administration decided it's not worth it. New York Times says this is misleading, where they say investments in other countries where migrants come from for programs to prevent violence and curb extreme poverty and hungover have the potential to deter illegal immigration, but the Obama administration's aid to Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, led by Mr. Biden, did not change much. Which in my opinion says that this is not misleading, this is just false. And I believe there is one more and we won't ignore what our own intelligence agencies have determined the most lethal terrorist threat to the homeland today: white supremacy terrorism. And they claim that this is mostly true, and this is just they're saying that spy agencies say that the bigger threat between Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, and right-wing white extremists is the white supremacists. I personally still think that I don't personally buy it. We look at the number of attacks that have been done in the last decade or two. Let's not forget, we had 9/11, and let's compare that to what happened on January 6th. I think one is significantly worse than the other. Finally, there's one more. America will not back away from our commitment to human rights and fundamental freedoms. And they claim this is exaggerated. Kind of interesting. They talk about how essentially how Biden actually has not been that strong on China, specifically with the treatment of the Uyghurs. And I think that this is actually a really good catch by New York Times. And I do think as a nation, we should push the current administration to denounce what is going on in China with their blatant human rights abuses. Moving off of the Biden address, we look at two other stories. The first being video shows Texas officer fatally shot man in front of his girlfriend and child. So we have another typical story about a individual shot by police, and you would think, it's obviously the police brutality. But NBC News hides what actually happened. The first shooting occurred at about 12:30 a.m. right before off-duty officer Gabriel Gutierrez called 911 for help and reported that Gonzalez was shot. Police said in the video, according to the 911 call in the video, Gutierrez and Gonzalez cut him off and pointed a gun at him, which prompted the off-duty officer to open fire. The footage on Wednesday did not show the initial encounter between Gutierrez and Gonzalez because the off-duty officer was in his personal car. Security video from a nearby apartment complex and bystander cell phone video appeared to show the cars side by side right before Gutierrez shot at Gonzalez. Authorities said they later found a gun in Gonzalez's car, which Scott Hendler, the Gonzalez family lawyer, confirmed. Hendler told NBC affiliate KXAN, however, that Gonzalez was not seen with the firearm in the footage released by authorities. Now, the obvious claim here is, if it's not in the video, you know, why did he have it out? And the exact claim is made in the article by NBC News here, that the incident that they're claiming that he, you know, pointed a gun at the officer is not actually on camera at all. It was, you know, the initial instance of the two meeting was off camera, which completely lines up with the story of the officer. Finally, by The Hill, Trump discussing resumption of Maga Rallies report. Former President Trump is discussing the possibility of resuming his signature Make America Great Again rallies as he seeks to remain a part of the political conversation while out of office and silence on Twitter. CNN reported that Trump is considering the resumption of his rallies and that he may hold events to support candidates challenging Republicans who have criticized him, such as Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, one of the 7 GOP senators who voted to convict the former President Trump in the second impeachment trial for inciting a mob to attack the Capitol on January 6th. I personally think that this is not going to be the greatest strategy for Republicans, but this is also kind of what is expected when we gave Trump power over the party. I think at some point Trump needs to get into the back scene of the Republican Party, do something kind of like what we see with like a George Soros or you know, anyone on the left that kind of just gives a lot of the big money into the events and holds a lot of the political power without being such in the camera light of everything. And a lot of that is due to what happened on January 6th. Thanks for tuning in to your April 30th Not So News update. Once again, please like and subscribe if you're looking for daily news content, and have a good one.